Welcome to the JCT screencast on Subject Learning and Assessment Review meetings. This screencast aims to provide support for English teachers and English subject departments in developing their understanding of SLAR meetings. This workshop was originally developed as a 2-hour in-school support package for teachers. As a result, there will be moments in this screencast where we will recommend that you press pause to engage in some of the activities that we have in the workshop. If you are watching this as a subject department, it would be important that at this stage a facilitator is nominated from within your group to support your engagement with the activities. The screencast can also be viewed by individual teachers who wish to find out more about SLAR meetings. It may also be useful to have the English specification, which can be found at www.curriculumonline.ie, available to refer to throughout the screencast. We have also developed handouts to accompany this workshop. These are available on our website, and it would be useful if everyone in the department had a copy of the handouts if you were planning in engaging in the activities and discussions that are built in to this workshop. The purpose of this screencast is outlined in our learning intentions and success criteria. During this screencast, we hope to deepen your understanding of the purpose, structure and value of SLAR meetings, and show how working with our colleagues can enhance our understanding of the classroom-based assessments. Our hopes will have been realised if you have developed a greater understanding of the structure, purpose and value of SLAR meetings, and if you have begun to identify ways in which SLAR meetings may further contribute to the collegial and individual development of subject learning in your English department. So if we ask ourselves, what is a SLAR meeting? The first question that we need to consider in this screencast is exactly that. According to the 2015 Framework for Junior Cycle, a subject learning and assessment review meeting is where teachers will share and discuss samples of their assessments of student work and build common understanding about the quality of student learning. In essence, SLAR meetings will become an integral feature of subject learning across junior cycle level. The purpose of the SLAR is, therefore, twofold. It will help us to build a common understanding of the quality of student learning, but will also provide us with opportunities to share practice and learn from one another. SLARs centre on positive professional interactions. SLAR meetings are a new aspect of assessment for all junior cycle English teachers in post-primary schools in Ireland. For effective SLAR meetings to take place, we need to have caring and supportive staff rooms, which encourage us to learn with and from one another and allows room for us to learn from our errors. According to John Hattie, professional relationships truly develop when there is a peer culture among teachers of engagement, trust and shared passion. We feel the SLAR meetings hold exciting potential in this regard. With this in mind, if you are watching the screencast as a subject department, now might be a nice moment to consider the ways that you already work together as a group. If you are not watching the screencast as a subject department, now might also be a nice moment to think about possible norms that work well or could work well in your subject department to ensure positive ways of working together as a group. SLAR meetings will require members of the department to bring examples of student work to be viewed and discussed by other members of the department. Later in the screencast, we look at some of the practical arrangements that will need to be in place for the SLAR meetings, but for now we will focus on generating norms which will help ensure these meetings run smoothly. Timekeeping and focusing on an agenda may be some norms for your meetings, while parking the ever-pressing corrections, silencing mobile phones and limiting comings and goings may be other considerations. As a department, now might be a good time to pause this screencast and discuss the questions presented on screen, which focus on how we interact with one another as a group and how we can best support each other. This workshop centres on enabling teachers and subject departments to engage in effective SLAR meetings. But before we can actually look at the nuts and bolts details of SLAR meetings, it is important to first set the context and gain an understanding of where the SLAR fits in as part of the wider junior cycle English learning journey. All of what we experience in engaging in a SLAR meeting feeds back into the wider learning journey taking place across the 3 years of junior cycle. There is a separate screencast which provides an overview of the junior cycle English learning journey, an image of which you can see here. Now might be a good moment to press pause and spend a few minutes viewing that screencast to ensure you gain a full understanding of where SLAR fits in as part of the wider junior cycle English learning journey. Let's now zoom in on second year, on the wider junior cycle English learning journey and the check-in assessment point that takes place here. As with first year, second year is very much grounded in creating rich learning experiences for our students. Providing rich learning experiences for students is supported in the English specification through the strands, learning outcomes and content guidelines. There is an important assessment check-in point that takes place towards the end of second year in the form of an oral communication classroom-based assessment, or CBA, which aims to capture the rich learning that takes place in our classrooms. Significantly, a subject learning and assessment review, or SLAR meeting, is a feature of this assessment point. Let's now go through the nuts and bolts details of the oral classroom-based assessment. As you will see on the screen here, the oral communication CBA centres on specific learning outcomes. If you have your English specification with you, now would be an opportune moment to pause the screencast so that you might have some time to read and discuss these learning outcomes, as well as taking time to consider all of the details surrounding the oral CBA as they appear on the screen. So if we remind ourselves of what a SLAR meeting is, again, according to the 2015 Framework for Junior Cycle, a subject learning and assessment review meeting is where teachers will share and discuss samples of their assessments of student work and build common understanding about the quality of student learning. Essentially, SLAR meetings will help us to build a common understanding of the quality of student learning, but will also provide us with opportunities to share practice and learn from one another. So if we remind ourselves of what a SLAR meeting is, according to the 2015 Framework for Junior Cycle, a subject learning and assessment review meeting is where teachers will share and discuss samples of their assessments of student work and build common understanding about the quality of student learning. Essentially, SLAR meetings will help us to build a common understanding of the quality of student learning, but will also provide us with opportunities to share practice and learn from one another. Key to taking part in a SLAR meeting, therefore, is having samples of students' work to share and discuss, which raises some queries around how many samples we should have or how we might go about sharing them with our colleagues. The next series of slides attempts to provide some clarity around this, in particular with reference to collecting samples of students' oral communication. There is a lot of information in the following slides, all of which is taken from the assessment guidelines, which can be accessed on www.curriculumonline.ie. This line from the assessment guidelines offers us some guidance as to how teachers should collect samples to share, and also how many samples we need to collect. To quote, teachers will record samples of oral communications by students that they will use for discussion at the subject learning and assessment review meetings. An example at each of the 4 descriptor levels, where feasible, will be needed for this purpose. It is important to note here that recorded samples may be either audio-visual or audio. A teacher's professional judgment is key to deciding on the recording medium best suited to a student's oral CBA and to give our colleagues a fair representation of a student's work. It is also important to note the wording where feasible. If all 4 descriptor levels are not present within a class group, then a sample of all 4 is not possible. A teacher should only collect a sample of the descriptor levels evident in the class grouping. The final point to note here is that samples of our assessments of students' work need to be shared with the facilitator prior to the SLAR meeting. We'll look at how we might go about this in a moment. In order to support schools in planning and preparing for SLAR meetings, we have organised this screencast into key questions that you will need to consider as a subject department. These questions focus on before, during and after the SLAR. For now, we will focus on what needs to take place before teachers engage in their SLAR meeting for the oral communication CBA. If you wish to focus on what needs to take place before teachers engage in the SLAR meeting for the collection of the students' texts, CBA, there is an accompanying screencast on our website. The first issue that needs to be considered for the SLAR meeting for the oral communication CBA is, how will you record samples to bring to the SLAR meeting? And secondly, how will you go about sharing them with your facilitator? Both of these issues are very much dependent on a school context. You may need to consider what equipment you have available in your school, what access you have to this equipment, how comfortable you are in using recording devices, and any additional support you may need. If you are a subject department watching this screencast together, now would be a very good time to pause and have a group discussion. Try to tease out some answers to these questions. If you are not watching this in a group, now is also a moment to pause and think about how you might address these issues. Another important issue to address before you engage in the SLAR meeting is how to identify students to record as samples of each descriptor level. Remember, the line from the guidelines we quoted earlier asked the teachers bring an example at each of the 4 descriptor levels where feasible to the SLAR meeting. This begs the question of how I will identify the students to record. Again, a line from the assessment guidelines offers further clarity around this. The teacher's decision on the particular students to record will be based on the range of achievement as he or she would predict at the time based on students' previous performance. Therefore, teachers' professional judgment underpinned by a good understanding of the features of quality with knowledge of the student's strengths and areas for development will be important factors in identifying the sample of students to be recorded. There are 3 key issues to highlight here. Identifying students centers on teachers' professional judgment, trusting teachers' capacity to make sound assessment judgment calls, teachers' familiarity with the features of quality and comfort in applying them to students' work, and finally, trusting a teacher's knowledge of their own students, allowing us room to use our professional judgment in choosing which students to record. One final question to consider as a group or as an individual teacher is, how familiar are you with working with features of quality and applying descriptors to students' work? The features of quality for the oral communication CBA can be found in the assessment guidelines on www.curriculumonline.ie, but for your convenience, we have also added them to the handout that accompanies this workshop. For each classroom-based assessment, the NCCA have articulated reference points that describe performance at 4 different levels. These features of quality are the criteria that will be used to assess the student work as best fitting one of the 4 descriptor levels. The process of working with features of quality is to take an on-balance, best fit approach. I will explain the process to you now and then invite you to engage in the process with your colleagues in a moment. When applying the features of quality, you begin with the first descriptor level, yet to meet expectations, and work your way through the others in turn until you reach a point where you think the student's work meets all or nearly all of the criteria within that descriptor level. For example, you are assessing a student's oral communication CBA and you examine the criteria within yet to meet. Satisfied that the work exceeds the criteria laid down, you move to the next descriptor level in line with expectations. You now interrogate the criteria outlined here. If you decide the work meets all or nearly all of this criteria, you move to above expectations. If at this point you believe the work meets some, but not all of the criteria within this descriptor level, you then take an on-balance approach. If the work satisfies all or nearly all of the criteria, then the descriptor assigned is above expectations. If, on the other hand, you believe the work meets some aspect, but not all or nearly all of the criteria within this descriptor level, then the descriptor assigned would be in line with expectations. The NCCA have provided us with exemplars, some of which you will be invited to view in a moment. When familiarising yourself with the features of quality in advance of the SLAR meeting, you may find the exemplars useful. We have now reached the end of part 1 of our screencast. Please open part 2, where we will work through the during and after process involved in the SLAR meeting and where we will also engage in a SLAR type experience. Thank you.